Well, it is Mark Rowan. Welcome to the 2000 Cubit Rule. We're so excited to have you with us, whether you're watching live or you're seeing this on a replay. Thanks for being a part of the SheepFeast family, where we talk about the FarmWorks CRM. And as you can see, this fancy new background, we got the sheep in the back and all that's going on. But we're talking about simplifying your tech and amplifying your message. That's our mission here as we work with coaches, speakers, authors, Christian entrepreneurs who are really trying to get their message out. And we want to help take all these disconnected tools, bring them together under one house, and just make things better overall. So if that's you, give us a call, go to our website, hit us on a DM. Doesn't matter. We'd be glad to talk to you. But enough about us. We want to talk about our guest today. And today's guest works with executive teams, corporate businesses to really help with their vision and their legacy, which is an important part of our lives as well as our businesses. So today we're so excited to have Jonathan Sheeley with us. How are you doing today?
Oh, fantastic. The sun is shining, the grass is getting green. We're getting there.
As green as the background in
Not quite.
the
Give me about a month and Wisconsin will look exactly like that.
yeah, Wisconsin, slightly different temperature as where we are here in Virginia Beach. I'm already like, actually, my son helped me out. I had my birthday on Easter this year, which was crazy. So I was like, your gift to me, mow the yard. So he did that yesterday for me. It was awesome. So your business is after your own name, Sheeley Executive Consulting. And we were just talking, your primary audience is the big kind of companies, which is great. We need everybody, small, big, in between. Everyone needs help and coaching and leadership, and that's what you do. But I don't think that's where you started out, right? It's not like you've been, hey, I came straight out into my adulthood and now I'm out here coaching people. So how did you get to this place you are today?
Oh, it's an excellent question because I don't think anyone's path into their careers are as linear as we think they're going to be when we're kids. Where our parents tell us, go to college, you'll get a great job. And what that like tells us in our mind is that, oh, I'm going to go to college and then I'm going to get this great job and then I'm going to be there the rest of my life. And, maybe that was what it was 50 years ago, but it's not that way now. I actually went to college for pastoral studies. And so I have a bachelor's in Bible and a master's degree in Bible as well. And when I was in seminary for my master's degree, the load was heavy. The research, the reading, and I was working full time to pay for college with the university that I was there with. And my wife and I decided I needed to take a break. And at the same time, providentially, there was a full-time job that was offered in the role or in the office that I had been functioning in. And so I took that job as a let's see, as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, fresh out of seminary with, just a head full of questions more than knowledge, I think, to take a break. And I was promptly plopped into management. I leapfrogged a bunch of my friends and colleagues from a graduate assistant to a director role. And it wasn't a stupid thing for them to do based on my past, but in hindsight, I'm like, man, they must have had either they were really, really desperate or they were just they had a lot of confidence. So I started in the enrollment services division and began with admissions and recruiting, and I traveled and I started to understand technology through customer service and user experience perspective, and really broke my teeth really fast on corporate systems. I mean, that's really what those responsibilities were. Got to travel, got to see 35 different states for the university, which was just a blast. Before we had kids, she was busy, my wife was busy teaching. And then made a transition from enrollment services to communications, which was a little bit more of a office of the president, PR, and marketing. That was a great pivot for me professionally. Really enjoyed that work. That's where I developed my love of like teaching, I think, because internally I was working a lot of developing conversations with people who really didn't understand what I was trying to help them do. They went to college for PhD, or they went to school to learn how to teach, and now I'm helping them understand how to do marketing. And so that's where I kind of got the bug for investing in others with information that they want to know, but they don't really have the access to it, and I do. And then when it became time for me to move on, and I was looking for other responsibilities to do another job, I was like, man, that was my favorite part, was the teaching, was the investing with the one-on-one leader who's just overwhelmed with the responsibilities that they needed to do. And that's how Sheeley Executive Consulting was born, out of necessity and out of creativity to pay the bills, but also to use the skills that I think God invested in my life with the mentors and responsibilities and roles that I had, to be able to give back to the community in ways that is lasting and impact, not just in bottom line benefits and boosts. And so that's kind of how I got started with like small and medium sized businesses too, because there's a lot of opportunity for growth. When a company has fewer than 100 employees, they have a much higher shot at rapid change in the positive direction. There's not as many logistical issues with moving that kind of improvement stakes forward. So yeah, that's kind of how we got started, and it's been a wild ride. But boy, I'm glad I made the pivot in my career that way.
Yeah, there's something that you mentioned early in your story is like, hey, you went to school to be a pastor. So I guess that was kind of the idea is like, hey, I'm gonna maybe pastor a church or be on team with someone. And this is a little bit of a common theme that I think we get to when we have different conversations with people is this idea of, okay, you thought maybe you were going to be a pastor, your career and your path. I always say this to man makes plans, God directs the path. So he's directing you
Mhm.
along, and you're ended up in education now, corporation type work. Do you still see that role as a pastor as kind of what you're doing, but it's not in the traditional sense? And how do you juxtapose those things?
Yeah, it has been a journey. I'm not gonna lie, it's been a journey figuring that out. I made a bit of a transition from church cultures when I left the university that I was working with. And so kind of redefining some of those terms for me and my family and my wife has been a part of that journey. Um, Frankly, one of the reasons why I took a break from seminary was that I wasn't convinced that 21-year-olds should be pastoring churches. So, when I was like, I'm not sure that I'm ready. And that initial question of that easy pipeline, graduate college, go be a pastor somewhere, that began my understanding of where I landed today, which is that every Christian is a full-time Christian, and your responsibility to evangelize the lost and to mentor other Christians and to invest in your local community, that's the same mandate no matter what position you hold in your local church. And it just so happens that the pastors of a church in our Western, American context are able to be paid to do that. And there's principles for that we see that in Galatians and in Corinthians and Ephesians, that the pastor's worth their support for the community. But I now I for so there's two things that I would say. I 100% love my background in research, in writing, and in people development. Because that's really, if you break down from, like, if you take the spiritual language out of a pastoral studies degree in seminary, that's what you're doing. You're doing research, you're writing, and it's language and communication skills with people. So that is an excellent background into business ownership. As long as you can make the transition, right? If you can mentally like pivot, all of the benefit that I got there. But number two, now I am able to be a maybe a more informed church member, right? So like I'm hoping to be an asset to whoever I am sitting with. In my church here in Southeast Wisconsin, I'm lucky that I have a pastor's team, right? That leads our church, and all of them are, either MDiv and PhD track. I mean, they're highly skilled, but there's nothing stopping me from being an assistant to them without having a role. And so I think there's a 2-for-1 situation that I end up seeing, that I fill the role of an informed church member because of my past, and I can pray for my pastors in a different way, because I know the grueling nature of preparing sermons week in and week out. But then also I think I'm able to use the perspective of like, people are important. That is a core theme to my business,
Mm.
and that comes directly from a heart to see people saved, but then also to see people grow.
One of the things that you said is interesting to me in your journey was like, I don't know if 21-year-olds should be pastoring churches. And of course, a couple of things came to mind, Paul exhorting Timothy about his youth. And, my pastor would often say, and there's this proverb that talks about where there's, oxen, it's going to be dirty essentially, right? It's like the
Mm,
young, strong people, like it's going to get messy, but they're the ones that you put the bulk of the load on, right? And so there's a couple of thoughts that just came to mind. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that because on one hand, I totally understand that, hey, am I supposed to step in and be a leader of all of these different generations of people? And of course, as someone that just finished a seminary, you've only had so much life experience. And even though you may love Jesus with all your heart, you don't necessarily know how to deal with a broken home situation or all those other
yeah.
things. But there's also these situations where God does raise up a David or fill in the blank, right? Daniel, all these guys, not all of them, but there's many people in the Bible that were super young and somehow God decided to use them in the midst of their weakness and his strength also. So just love your thoughts on this.
Yeah. So I think in our context in America, we're blessed to even have this discussion,
Mm,
right? And I've had this discussion with other friends of mine who either are currently pastoring, or have taken a similar journey of me, where they found another job, another career. And really what it comes down to for me is that in America, where we have the blessing of easy access, frankly, to church, this is something that we can talk about because it's open and there's access. In a different time or in a different place or in a different geographic location, this wouldn't even be a discussion because it's anyone who can pastor. Anyone who fills the qualifications of the pastorate from the New Testament perspective is who we're going to have pastor, because there's just not access to that kind of education, access to that kind of leadership position. And so, like, I totally, it's like a we have this privilege in America because we have such broad access to Christianity. But other than that, like, I really do, like, it's important that we underscore the power for pastors comes from the Spirit anyway. And so when it is a 21-year-old or younger, if you look through like the American West, when sometimes it was like an 18, 19-year-old who was preaching every week, and but also farming and whatever else,
yeah.
those men were still trusted with the same responsibility, which is to shepherd the flock with the Spirit's enablement, and to rely heavily on the truth of the Scripture to do that. So the closer your ability to believe that our Scripture is given to us for everything that we need, the better a pastor you're going to be. Now, your community is going to greatly dictate the complexity of your sermons, the complexity of your delivery. Nowadays, when you could go to, I don't know, go to Washington, D.C. and look at the churches in Washington, D.C. They look a lot different than the churches, close to me out in farm country. They're going to look different because the culture of those communities are different. And so, every local church needs something different. And I personally know that if the Lord ever did direct me back into a preaching career, I would have a lot better chance of doing that. And so, like, your journey of faith and your trajectory of your career are not dissimilar. They work in tandem for a Christian, and um, I will have a more appropriate gravity, a spirit of gravity going into it if that ever did come into my career than I would have as a younger person. And yet the struggle that I'm sure that older pastors come with is that now they have to fight pride because they've been there and they've done that. And so like there's just different challenges for a young person versus an older person. And I always love it when Timothy's brought up because I'm pretty sure Timothy, if I have my facts correct, Timothy was probably a middle-aged person, a middle-aged man, when he was being told that he was too young, which is totally appropriate for Paul to be like, hey, don't let people like talk you down.
Right.
Like he was probably in his 30s, which in Bible times would have been like our 40s and 50s. So he was totally not even a young person.
Hmm.
But the principle of not ignoring youth is based on the concept that the scripture is the power, the spirit is the power for ministry, not someone's age, age, race, whatever else it is.
Amen. I mean, this is a fascinating conversation. We're going to camp here all day, obviously, because you're not doing that right now. But the point
But I
being,
have big thoughts.
you're right, that ultimately we have to hear what God's doing and saying to us, right? And so for some people that might be very young that He's called you to do that. For others, He's going to have them eventually get into coaching and corporations, so He needs them to get off of that. And but you bring up another thing about the age of in the 30s of for Timothy. You think about David. I always look at David coming to become a king at 33. He was anointed as a very young man. Of course, he was
Mm.
powerful and the Spirit was with him. Same with Jesus, 12 years old. He's teaching everybody, blowing their minds, but he didn't go into ministry until he was 33. And so there is that kind of a precedent as well. But so we'll kind of move off the pastoral thing for now. But uh, so you did get into this education scene, and like you said, you really started doing the communication. So I could, just see the journey that God led you on in these different steps that allow you to now go to a business and begin to use these tools and these, skills that you've developed. And what's the primary thing you do when you're coming to a business, and whether it's communication or relationship building, all that, what's the main thing typically that you're helping people with when first start talking with them?
I would tell people that I'm a business coach or executive coach and a legacy advisor. And there's a difference between someone who's maybe a sales coach or a communication coach. There's a lot of coaches out there today, and anything that someone has a skill for, you can end up being a coach for that thing. And so I articulate my value is I'm going to help you think long term and short term at the same time. That's legacy planning, right? You have to take action today if you want tomorrow and next year, 15 years from now to look different. And so I've written what's called the legacy leadership architecture, and it helps you build the system of planning, the system of leading your team, the system of cascading vision down the chain of command and empowering your people to be your greatest assets, your greatest warriors for whatever you're doing. And that is what I want to bring in a one-on-one coaching environment. Like as the top leader, as the top responsible person for that company, it's got to start with you. And so I start with a one-on-one coaching with one person in the company to see where we're going. And there's some workshops that I bring that are more consulting in nature. So coaching is usually where I'm listening and asking questions and getting you to think. Consulting is I'm bringing frameworks and implementing them into your business. And so there's some consulting that happens to the team if the one-on-one coaching client seems to think that that would be valuable. And a lot of times that's the bridge between working just with the leader of the company and working with multiple leaders in a business advisory environment. And so it's scalable, and it's also dependent on where that company is and flexibility. If you're working really hard and you're still not seeing returns, I'm probably not going to be the best person to come in as a coach because I'm not going to get you to stability. I take people from stability to legacy. There's a lot more experienced coaches or consultants out there that are experts at getting you from this is a good idea to I'm actually got a valuable company here moving forward. And I tell that to my clients. It's not that I don't want to help them. It's just that I don't think I'm going to be the best person because I don't work fast. Uh, some people are very intuitive and they build structured improvement sets quickly, but I think in the long term. And so we're going to the legacy architecture is based on the premise that you need to have a purpose for work that is the why, answering that purpose. And you can get a why off of just about any company can have a why that doesn't necessarily have to be talked about all the time. It can just be your driving motivation. It's the fuel that keeps you going. But you also have to have a vision. Where are you going to take this company in 15 years? What are we doing for our clients, for our customers that's different than anyone else? And how do we do it? But if you don't have a short term mission to accomplish that vision, you're not going to get anywhere. So I actually teach Donald Miller's version of a mission statement that is three economic realities, a purpose statement, and a deadline. That's the formula. Mission statements have they have different forms and functions. Most people's mission is what I would call their purpose. They say, hey, I'm going to end world hunger. That's a purpose, right? Like that's not a mission. A
Mm.
mission is we're going to go take this county in this underserved population of this city and we're going to get them access to food by this time. Right? That's a mission. There's an end date to it. There's an accomplishment. And then if you have a purpose, a vision, and a mission, you got to make a plan and it's got to start somewhere. And so I help people build startup plans like a 90-day sprint plan that incorporates these principles into their company for the long haul. Like, let's make it work. I was inspired by my wife's comments on a company here in our town of Watertown. We were in a car. We were in the car. We were talking about this company, and there was a plant fire that leveled the plant, and it's one of the largest employers in the city. And it was like devastating. But this employer kept everyone on payroll while the plant was being rebuilt. They weren't going to work, but they were still on payroll.
Mm.
That's insane. And that, yeah, I'll tell you what, that company has the best rating in Watertown.
Oh, yeah.
And we kind of distilled it into this principle that good companies may have a good reputation with their customers and clients. Good companies may have a good reputation with their employees even, but great companies, the community knows, the families of the employees know that it's a good company. And that's the distinction that I'm trying to help my clients get to. Let's go from being a well-respected company to like, nah, this is a great company in our community.
Below all that, that's some really good stuff. You touched on a lot of things and a lot of questions came to mind. But the first one was, we hear the word legacy a good bit in different contexts and, in the church world. I think our church maybe still calls it legacy giving, like above and
Mm.
beyond your tithes and offerings kind of thing. It could be changed now, but anyway, so it's a big part of culture, right? What is your definition at Sheeley Executive Consulting of legacy? If you could give a fairly concise one.
I think legacy is what keeps going when you're gone.
It's good.
Because what you do while you're still there is just the plan. That's the standard operating procedure. What keeps working and what keeps being built and developed, and it might be adjusted, but like at least in its core skeletal function, keeps going while when you're gone. That's a legacy. So I think about this with my family. All right. So I am blessed to have had grandparents on my mom's side and my dad's side that I got to attend their 50th wedding anniversary party. That's like that perspective of marriage matters and family matters came to my parents and have come that has come to me and my wife, and I'm passing that to my kids. That family value is a legacy that my grandparents built, even though both of my grandfathers are gone and my grandmothers they're not actively with their partners anymore. that is a legacy that they couldn't, like they can't see all of the benefits that happen in my family and all of our cousins and all of the families that my family will impact and everything. So that's a legacy that keeps going. And that most of the time people think about legacy, well, not most of the time, a lot of times people think about legacy in giving, in financial terms, and those are certainly like maybe indicators of an impact of a legacy. Like in here in Wisconsin, there's there's been a lot of manufacturing legends. There's legendary inventors that have been from Wisconsin, and so if you drive around Milwaukee, you'll find a lot of auditoriums for schools and buildings named after some of these guys. Well, that is one kind of legacy, but that's a building, and the building eventually will come down. But the kind of legacy that I want my clients to build is something that can't be torn down because it is a constantly being improved and adjusted and promoted forward. The business principles, the value of that culture of that company, the value that you provide to your customers and to your clients, this radical, impressive value, excellence, and these kinds of things. That's the kind of legacy that we're going for. Not just, I mean, and that stuff happens because of resources, but it's not, the resource is not the legacy impact that we're looking for.
That's good. I want to be honest with you, Jonathan. When you said Family Matters, I immediately thought of Steve Urkel. I'm sorry. I'm a 90s kid. Um, but no, family does honestly matter. And that is a great example of a legacy. So I'm so glad to hear that about your family. And yeah, if there's something that we all should really lean into, that would be one to start with for sure. Beyond the simple definition, I was also wondering of maybe some misconceptions that people have about legacy. Of course, you explained it's not what we're doing right now. It's like what we stop and then it keeps going. There are some other things that you run up against that are like people are like, oh, I want to do this, and you're like, well, that's not really legacy.
Yeah, well, certainly tell when someone says that they're intending to build a legacy, there's like a red flag that kind of like there's at least a yellow flag. So like there's this tension between, are you building this for yourself or are you building this for other people? So like that's probably the highest like upstream question you have to ask. If the legacy that you're intending to build is so that you can feel, prestigious and so that you can, maybe have access to new and cooler environments and all the perks, like that's just bad leadership at core. If you read Patrick Lencioni's The Motive, he really dissects the concept that leaders don't they don't graduate to this level of privilege and then stop having to be everything that they were already were, which is what some leaders think. The real leaders actually get more responsibility. The higher ranking in a company that you are, the more responsibility you have. And legacy just takes that even step further and says, now I'm actually going to like fade out of the picture as fast as I can so that other people can carry the mantle, so that the purpose is being reached, the vision for the company is being achieved, and that the new vision, which will hold the same principles if you do your work in legacy training right, it'll hold the same principles. But guess what? In 55 years, our world will be completely different than what it is today. And so you can't dictate what the vision will be in very concrete terms. You have to do the work of building the character of a company. Just like a kid, you have to build the character so that when they interact with things that you don't even know about yet, they will be prepared for that and they will be strong to reach those problems and those um, the headwinds of things that we can't even predict. I mean, who could have predicted things like the COVID pandemic? Who could have predicted, wars that happen quickly because of stuff that happens? Like, you think about world wars, you think about what happens today. These are not necessarily things that you can plan for in a company, but the kind of character that you build into a company gives you the chance to pivot and to respond decisively because you already have a framework for those decisions. That doesn't mean you do things rashly, but you can act decisively because you know what you're about still.
I'm going to do a circle back. You earlier mentioned the difference in someone talking about purpose versus their mission statement. And
Yeah.
these are terms that when companies are either developing or maybe as they grow, they're like, hey, we need to revisit our vision statement, our mission statement. And for some people, or many people potentially, they might be like, well, that kind of sounds like the same thing. What's the difference in like me having a vision statement or you already said the purpose or a mission statement. So is that something that you sit down with people and like delineate those things and help them map that out in a more direct manner?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a part of my, if you want to call it like my intellectual property set, like everyone defines these things different. But having been married to an English educator for 8 years, I'll tell you that words are descriptive and prescriptive depending on what you use. And so I want to use a specific definition with my clients that works for them to be able to use in their company. And so I try to boil it down as simply as possible into a framework that fuels their company and doesn't like make you stop and scratch your head. What does that even mean? And so I tell people all the time, the thing that you say, that you articulate, is way more important than what you call it, right? So your purpose has to be felt, and you don't have to call it your purpose. It's just the thing that aligns the company, and you do want to articulate it as you're hiring and making decisions and stuff like that, but it's so core to your company that you may not have to talk about it all that often because it's something that's felt. Your vision is your long-term plan because you have to be forecasting a direction. So if there's any simple distinction for vision, vision is direction, because we can say that we're headed this way even though we don't necessarily know what's beyond the next hill, or what conflict will happen between here and there, but it's a consistent trajectory for your company. And your mission, the way that I train people to do it, the mission statement is is time bound so that you have something to measure against. Companies have to have measurable economic realities. You have to have numbers involved in your aspirations, and so your mission statement breaks down into your quarter by quarter goals, maybe your annual goals. And I like mission statements to be like time bound for the next 3 years, because that gives you something, that gives you enough time to work towards something that's big enough, that's audacious, but it's not so big that it's like I don't even have any idea how we would accomplish that. So if you can build those milestones quarter by quarter, annual, into a 3-year mission statement, that stacks into your vision, and that stacks towards,
Yeah.
really conquering something means a lot to your company.
Yeah.
So, those are my simple definitions, but when it comes to practice, um, it depends on where someone is coming from with those statements on how we use the ones that are already there, or if we need to start from scratch.
That's awesome. As I've been listening to you talk about this, I'm like, when we do a little bit of a role play and pretend like
Mm.
SheepFeast is not your ideal customer yet, maybe come back to us in like 2 to 3 years, hopefully, and and then we could hire up Sheeley Executive Consulting. But of course, we've worked through these things at different times, right? Where we've come up with, if you go to our website, you can see our vision statement. And of course, this was written probably 4 years ago. And I'm thinking about too, core values is probably another thing that you can work through with people, right?
Hmm.
And while we haven't done that, there is one that we have, and it's the name of the podcast. It's the 2000 Cubit Rule. And it's about making room for God to move. So if you didn't know, if you're watching this, 2000 Cubit, what the heck? Joshua 3:4, the people are going in the promised land. They don't know where they're going, so they have to stay 2,000 cubits from the Ark of the Covenant. So that's a core value. We want to make room for God to move in our business. And I want to read our vision statement.
Okay.
It'll be interesting because I'm like, I wonder if this is even accurate for us now because it hasn't really probably been touched in a while. And then I want to get your feedback on it. And you can do a little bit of role play, like if you were coming in and being like, okay, now what? So it says, at SheepFeast, our passion is to see disciples become everything Jesus called us to be. Our farm work helps anointed leaders turn followers into committed disciples, combining relationship building and effective technology. SheepFeast removes the burden of going it alone. All right. So if you need to see it, I can share it as well.
I
To
got it pulled up too.
okay, so you got it on your thing. So it's interesting as I read that, generally that's true. But also, we're talking like our audience has kind of shifted a little bit, but our and our what I think is our vision is the thing that I didn't mention too was 1 million discipled. Like that's essentially
Mm.
what we feel like God wants us to, help equip the equippers kind of thing, right? So what are your thoughts in that, what I just read and some of the things that I also mentioned?
Well, so you vision statements often include purpose, right? So that's something that I encourage people to do because your vision, whether your vision is a sentence, a paragraph, or a document, right, and everyone has a little different take on how we do it. There has to be fuel there, and so what I like to see right out of the gate is there's a passion, right? That there's a purpose in the vision here. Um, I like to see that there's other people involved in this vision, or so it's not just a vision for your company. It's like, what are you doing? So you have a passion, and the passion is for other people to be benefited. That's good, right? Like so that right out of the gate, checkbox number one. It's a hallmark of a good vision. Um, then it starts to go into what you do. So you help, and that term, that's a pivot from here's where we're headed culturally or broadly to here, and here's how we're going to do it. That's an important part of your vision. So you're going to help turn followers into committed disciples. Like that's an important like transition. All right. So if your vision statement doesn't have the transition from what we want to accomplish and how we're going to do it, no one's going to understand what's going on in the vision. And then you actually put some teeth into it by saying what that looks like. And that looks like combining relationships and effective technology and removing the burden, right? So those two actions, combining and removing, are they're the touch point that most regular employees, line level employees, need to have to. So what am I supposed to do a part of that? Well, if, as long as you are combining relationships and technology, you're doing the vision. As long as you're removing the burden from someone else, you're doing the vision. Now, what I love to do with other people in their other vision statements is then, and this makes sense because it's a public version, right?
Right.
I like to get people to put some stakes in the ground of where that looks. Now, you said you want a million people impacted. All right. So that's a good like mile marker, milestone that you put into your vision statement that drives decision making.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, decision making for staying under 100,000 people at at an extremely high level, high quality, is what gets you Lamborghini and Ferrari thinking. But if you're at the million plus mark, that gets you Toyota and Ford thinking, right? So it's the difference between everything has to be incredibly perfect and the details are insanely, specific and high quality, and yet and like that kind of thinking is what happens with small numbers. And then at a large number, it becomes process, it becomes system, it becomes predictability and dependability. And so that kind of milestone in your vision statement helps your people and helps your leadership team make decisions that sound like your company, right? And so like this is there's a lot to work with here. Generally, I help people build out a vision statement that can be used for their stakeholders, like a nice paragraph like this, and then one that's much more developed that actually ends up looking more like it might look like a business development plan. more so than an individual paragraph. And every company is slightly different in how they want to do that and how specifically they want the language to be. Like when I put my 15-year vision out for my company as a startup company, that's like envisioning what my company even is. So that was important for me to put a lot more specificity into my vision statement. But for a company that's already been in business for 50 something years or something like that, it could be kind of hard to see, well, how is our company different in 15 years than it was 50 years ago? So it kind of depends on the context of the company. But really, what I like, if I'm going to review it, it's like there's got to be your purpose statement here. And that's your passion statement in your passion sentence. There's the pivot between what's important and how we are going to do that. And that in your statement is you're turning followers into disciples. Like that's what it means to see disciples become everything Jesus called us to be. And then how specifically you're going to do that is by combining relationships and technology. So like it's the purpose, the pivot, and the thing, like the what.
Mhm.
That's really, in a sense, that's what a vision statement is.
Well, that was pretty cool. We got to see like Jonathan live in action. And is that something that you would kind of start with a lot of people? Like, let's say, you are working with your ideal corporate customer and they're like, hey, let's pull out that vision statement. Let's pull out your, core values. Are those kind of where the conversation starts, or is there somewhere else that you typically go in
It
with?
kind of depends on where the leader is, because if the leader comes to me with, I really feel like we're doing something good, but I can't figure out how to get any further, then I do a lot of question asking. I'm about 90% done with an assessment, like building an assessment to kind of give some language to my clients and to my prospects around these things. And it kind of gives you a scorecard on the components of leadership, legacy leadership that I train on. And that I think is going to be a huge help to me to direct the conversation faster, maybe. But I do a lot of question asking, right? So it's really going to be, what do you think your culture is about? How do you grade your meetings? When you get to decision making time, where's the unity and where's the disruption amongst the unity? Like, is it healthy? Is it not healthy? Do you have do you have anonymity in decision making, or are people owning their decisions? There's just a lot that goes into quality leadership structure in unique companies that you can't there's no specific formula for the stuff on top of the skeleton, but if you don't have the skeleton, there's really tough to do things well. um I think I see a lot of companies that brag about how fast they grow. And I love scrappy companies. I love even like the American dream of building a company really quickly and being able to have a huge impact in whatever industry you're working in. But I see a lot of the pivot between a startup company and a developed and mature company, and then maybe even from that mature company into the next leader, like the second generation owner, or the second CEO post for a founder, or founder moves onto another company, and especially the whole world of mergers, acquisitions, and sales. It's just, that's a whole nother ball game that I'm not saying that that's negative, because that's the competitive market that gets our economy where it is. But if your company wants to be about something important, there's going to be more intentionality front loaded in your company to verify and to ensure that your legacy lasts than some people maybe want to deal with. And I'll be the first one to tell you that when I was younger, I hated how slow business has to be sometimes. I'm okay with it more ish. I still want my company to grow, but it is a tension that you have to play of doing things insanely well and making sure that you grow so that you can keep the doors open, so that you can reach the heights that your company is intending to get to.
One thought that comes to mind is, biblical principle of little by little, precept by precept. And, I've said this before because it ties into the 2000 cubit rule. God speaking to the Israelites is like, I can't give you all this land because you're not big enough. or strong enough to take it on, it will devour you. And so there's the grace of God as we are believers building whatever it is. It could be business, ministry, whatever. And we might have the big vision that God probably did give to you, but it's usually not an overnight success, even though in the world, right? You often hear this, the overnight success in 10 years, right? We
Hmm.
often
Yeah.
see like the big, cresting of whatever that, business was. But honestly, the ones that last, it's because they had the foundation and built it over time. And that made me think of like in legacy companies that have been around for over 100 years now. A lot of times you look at what they did to start out, it's a lot different than what they're doing now. There's huge companies around the world that, I think of Kia. Had to do a marketing study on them in college. Like they were making bikes, and just random other little things, and eventually became a worldwide automobile manufacturer, right? And so there's this whole idea of, what you start out as, it could be completely different, like you said, when the next generation takes it from you.
Yeah, it's so I find that that kind of thinking, that flexible, in the brain chemistry world, it's like the elasticity to say that like to understand this thing. That's a really tough thing to get around, and that's what proves the difference between a selfish legacy and a selfless legacy. I think when you think about it, it's um, how can we serve our clients and customers the best way possible, and you can't get married to those processes, to the particular things you sell, or the the email type, like in the specifics of today. It's like, pre AI, there was a lot of technology that was like, man, we're safe, we've got it gold. Now a lot of that stuff is really, it's on the horns to prove its value in a new way. And I think that kind of disruption will prove which of those companies were in it to provide value for their clients and their customers, or which of them were in it for the money. Because some of them will pivot hardcore, and some of them will adopt the new technology to enhance. Some of them will gouge their clients just for the profits. And so there will be this like this weeding through of those companies in this kind of disruption, like business culture and this business moment, that is important to learn from as a company who wants to build a legacy, to be able to say, so is it the delivery of this thing that we want for our clients, or is it what our clients are asking for in this new area? One of my favorite terms in business, and actually in ministry too, we call them sacred cows.
Mm.
Like sometimes you got to kill the sacred cow that has nothing to do with the mission, the vision, and the purpose of your company anymore. It was a vehicle for accomplishing a task at one time in culture, and no longer exists. Like, one of my favorite examples of this, that's not emotional at all, that makes it a good example, is like if you ever look at like a thrift store or a office furniture outlet, you will find all kinds of furniture that was really well designed to store stuff that we no longer even use in business. So, like, you go to a thrift store, you'll see like a DVD rack that people are like, I finally got rid of all my DVDs. Or a VHS rack. It had the specific slots designed for a VHS and for a DVD. Or maybe floppy disks and cassette tapes. Like, these were vehicles
Yeah.
for the accomplishment of the task of music, of video entertainment, whatever it was. And all of those services have shifted, and all of this infrastructure is left over. And sometimes you just got to get it out of the closet. Like, it's dead weight, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that spring cleaning that we all do. Is this actually something I need to keep? Or is this something that I should get rid of? And really, a lot of times that's what I'm helping my clients with, is that spring cleaning of the things that you're doing as a company. Because sometimes you just drift from one year to the next, and you might say you have a $0 budget, but actually in practice someone is just saving the Excel sheet is a new year, and it's the exact same process. And yeah, you have to defend everything. So you need to actually have a decision making framework for that kind of that transition, that kind of legacy action. And it is hard work. It is not, I mean, if you've ever cleaned through someone's house that passed away,
Mm.
it's hard work to sift through stuff and to know what was of value to this person and what should be of value to me. And sometimes companies are the same way. You got to sift through that stuff before the legacy is handed off so that you can see what was of value and what was not of value and what was just, Aunt Mary's pencils. It's just like these are not expensive pencils. They're Ticonderoga whatever's, number two versus like, this collection of pens over here that's worth, $100,000.
Yeah, I just wanted to confirm that that's not a whole stack of VHSs on your top shelf over there.
No, no, that's actually my planner. I used the full focus planner and and it's just 1/4 of the year. And so yeah, I am a little analog in my personal productivity on that route, but
But not
it,
VHS analog.
it's not VHS analog.
I thought there. I was pretty sure it would be pretty big. It might be a beta tape, but
Yeah.
yeah, we're Jonathan. This has been great. We're starting to wrap up our time together for today, and want to let people know, obviously, to go to your website to get what they need, and that's going to be SheeleyExecutiveConsulting.co, and there's something there for people that who are kind of fit the audience that you're looking for, that's available on your site called the Leadership Reset Sprint. Can you kind of explain that a little bit as we wrap up? And then, of course, I want to give you kind of the final word, any encouragement or kind of leadership tips you want to leave us with.
Yeah, the reset sprint is really a concentrated dose of coaching in an individual session so that you can get a good idea of what's going on right now in your leadership and make a pivot. A lot of times you just need someone to talk to that's outside of your company. But I have found that anyone can talk a good talk for about 55 minutes. And sometimes you can even talk a good talk for maybe 100 minutes. But what I have found is somewhere around 130 minutes, you run out of those whitewashed answers. And so a reset sprint is 3 hours. It's interview based. So I want to get to know your company, get to know what's going on. And basically what I promise you is that you'll walk away with a handful of things that you either need to do or a handful of questions you need to ask some other people in your company and a decent score for what's going on in your company. I intend to to embed the assessment into that reset sprint so that we have some language to talk through. But it's really engineered for people who are not sure if they need coaching or advisory work, but they're also not sure what it would even be like. And it is high stakes in those moments when you start to get those questions that are getting needling towards what's actually happening. But I've never had someone do it who didn't have something similar to this to say. Wow, I hadn't even thought of that.
All right.
That's my point. That's what I'm getting for. That's what I do is get you to think about something you haven't thought about before, or maybe you haven't thought about it in a long time, because that's what outside voices are for. And it's challenging for some leaders to have secure, confidential outside voices, and that's what I want to be for people.
Beautiful. Well, Jonathan, thanks again for all of your expertise, for doing a little role play with us. That was fun. And go ahead and avail yourselves, folks, to his resources if you're in that spot of being established, but really looking for the legacy to be developed. Jonathan is your man. Thank you so much for your time. Any final words?
No, I just appreciate being invited, Mark. I enjoy this kind of discussion where it touches the holistic nature of business and professionalism and leadership. And kudos for you and your company having big, hairy, audacious goals that you're trying to get out there to do too, because that's what we're here for. We're a part of the creation mandate when we're out here building businesses.
Yes, a BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. Yes, that's awesome. So for everyone else, thanks for being a part of the 2000 Cubit Rule. We will see you next time. Blessings.